Hi, welcome back to this Thursday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Program is Focal Point. The network is the American Family Radio Talk Network, AFR Talk, the most dangerous and feared radio network in all of America. Why? Because we unapologetically reason with you from the Scriptures. We examine the Scriptures daily to see if what we are being told by the media, what we are being told by our educators, what we are being told by our politicians is true. And if it doesn't match the revealed Word of God, we reject it flatly. This is our authority. And that's what makes us a danger to the world. Now I'm going to have a chance, I hope a little bit later in the program, to talk about the latest proposed IRS regulations. We've sent an action alert out to you on this subject where the IRS is proposing new regulations that would threaten the very existence of AFA. Because these specific regulations are directed to C4 institutions, C4 organizations, and most C3 organizations like American Family Association have a C4. Now a C4 is under the same category in the IRS code, same section, but it is it's what frees an organization up to distribute nonpartisan voter guides, to engage in voter registration drives, and to participate in get out the vote campaigns, and to keep legislative scorecards to record how lawmakers vote. Now, what the IRS wants to do is to say to C4s like the American Family Association, if you engage in any of that kind of behavior within 60 days of a general election, if you even mention the name of the candidate, let alone endorse or support or whatever, but you even mention the name of a candidate or a political party within 60 days of an election, we are going to yank your tax-exempt status. It's gone. It's history. You're in the archives. So it's an effort now on the part to get at the C3s by going after the C4s. That's like a firewall for us. If that goes, I mean, we've got a C4, so they'd shred that, but then there's no layer of insulation and protection for C3s. So this is absolutely critical issue. There's a comment period through the end of February. I encourage you to go to our website, figure out how you can weigh in and make your comments known on this, and contact your congressman. The latest budget, this $1.1 trillion monstrosity budget that was approved this week, maintains funding for this effort on the part of the IRS. We think the solution is for the House of Representatives to defund IRS in this area. Say to the IRS, you can't spend a dollar enforcing these regulations. So anyway, that's coming along. And why is the Obama administration, why are they doing this? Because they fear conservative groups like the American Family Association, like the Family Research Council, because we challenge the bilge and the swill and the lies and the falsehoods and the dishonesty that they repeatedly belch out to the public. We challenge them on it. We call them on that, and they do not like to be challenged. So they want every voice of dissent to be silenced, and this is how they are starting the attack. Now, for the next few minutes, I want to talk about a very, very important issue. Number to call if you want to join the conversation, by the way, is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. I'll give you an update after the next break about my conversation with the city attorney in Norman, Oklahoma today. Had a long conversation with him. Invited him to come on the program, by the way, and they turned us down. So I think they're heading for the tall grass. I think they're heading for the weeds because they know they've been busted. They know they look bad. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just about 10 minutes. Now, the thing I want to talk about today is essentially what amounts to a second American Revolution. We had the first one, 1776, Declaration of Independence. Now, what led up to that is the American people just got sick and tired of tyranny, got sick and tired of a central, powerful, all-powerful central government meddling in our affairs, meddling in our lives, pilfering money from us, robbing from us the right to legislate public policy on our own best interest. We just got fed up with it. We'd had it up to here, and it was time to declare our independence from the crown. Now, I think we need the same thing today, frankly. We need another American revolution. We need another American Declaration of Independence. Now, I want to be very, very clear here at the outset. I am not talking about armed rebellion. Please do not misunderstand me. I am not talking about chaos. I'm not talking about anarchy. I'm not talking about civil unrest. I'm not talking about vigilante groups taking up arms. I'm not talking about that. I am talking about using the political process as it exists to declare a fresh wave of liberty and independence in the United States. And I think the thing that might trigger it, that I hope will trigger it, is what we're seeing judicial activists do with state constitutions that define marriage as the union of one man and one woman. You know, just a few weeks ago, there were 31 states, or a few months ago, 31 states that had constitutional amendments in place, in effect, that defined marriage as the union of one man and one woman. Now that's down to 27. Is it because the people changed their mind and they went to the polls and voted to repeal that amendment? Absolutely not. It's because judicial tyrants on the federal bench imposed their view of society on the states and overturned their state marriage amendments. Now, and that number is going to dwindle to zero because there's a process in place here. It's inevitable. Every time a federal judge gets a chance, they fairly salivate. They salivate over the prospect of overturning these marriage amendments by these poor, benighted Neanderthal Cro-Magnons that decided that marriage ought to be protected in their state constitutions as a man-woman institution. Now, how do we know that that's correct? How do we know that marriage is a union of one man and one woman? Because the Bible tells us it is. Genesis 2:24, for this reason, a man, one man, shall leave his mother and father and shall cleave to his wife, one woman, one wife, and the two, not the three, not the four, not two men, not two women, the two, one man, one woman, joined in marriage, shall become one flesh. That's Genesis 2:19 or 24. And Jesus affirms the same thing in Matthew 19. Marriage is a union of one man and one woman. Paul affirms the same thing, 1 Corinthians 7:2. Let each man have his own wife and let each woman have her own husband. So that's what the scriptures teach. So we reason with you from the scriptures. That's the standard because that's what's taught in the revealed word of God. And 31 states went to the polls and said, we believe what the Bible teaches about marriage. We believe the word of God. We affirm it. We understand and accept and approve that that is the right understanding of marriage. And then these judges come in here and they overturn these marriage amendments. Now, I believe, and this is just judicial recklessness. This is judicial activism. It is judicial tyranny. This is a black-robed oligarchy. These are not judges. They are tyrants. They are dictators. They're imposing their view of domestic policy on citizens, robbing them of the right to make these decisions for themselves. Now, I believe there's an antidote to this, and that's what I want to lay out for you, and I'd like your reaction to this. Here is the antidote to this judicial recklessness, and it services what I believe is the greatest need of the hour right now in America. This is the number one need in America right now, and that is for a state governor to defy these judicial dictators. That's what we need. We need a governor of a state which has a marriage amendment in place, who, if his people have spoken, if they've amended their constitution, defined marriage as one man, one woman, we need a governor who will refuse to comply with a judicial ruling, even if it comes from the Supreme Court, which directs his state to recognize marriages that are based on the infamous crime against nature. If his state has said, no, we're not going to do it. If his people have spoken, if the electorate has spoken, and that's how you amend constitutions, the people themselves have got to go to the ballot box. They got to punch a lever for or against natural marriage. And in 31 states, they've gone to the polls and they've said, we want natural marriage, biblical marriage, God-ordained marriage recognized in our state. So what we need is a governor who will say, look, if a federal judge, even the Supreme Court, if they come along and say, no, you can't govern yourselves, we're not going to allow you to have a constitution that's shaped by the people. We're going to set that aside and we're going to impose our will on you by just raw judicial power. But remember, our concept of governance is that ultimate political power belongs to the people and not to the judges. You know, the Constitution begins, we the people, not we, the black-robed oligarchy. So what we've got is we've got these tyrants, we've got this whole phalanx of King Georges out there, And it's time for governors to stand up against these tyrants and say no more. Now, some people naturally are going to accuse us of being ones that are breaking the law, and I say it's absolutely the reverse. If a governor does this, he would be the one that is upholding the law and fulfilling his oath of office. It is the judicial tyrants that are violating the Constitution, because the Constitution gives absolutely no right to the central government to dictate marriage policy to the states. None. Zero. Nada. Zip. It's not in the Constitution. Nowhere in the Constitution will you find any authorization for the central government to define marriage for the states. Even the Supreme Court last summer, they said, look, this has been the province of the states historically in our form of jurisprudence. So it's these activist judges that are defying the rule of law. It's these activist judges that are violating the Constitution. And I say it's time for a governor to uphold his oath of office or her oath of office. In Oklahoma, it's a female governor. Using his in a generic sense, it's time for a governor to uphold his oath of office. He swore to uphold the laws of his state, the Constitution of his state, as well as the Constitution of the United States, and simply refuse to comply, to defy these tyrants. Remember back in the day, the founders, one of their frequent mottos is rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Benjamin Franklin wanted that on the motto as the motto on our national seal. Thomas Jefferson put it on his own personal seal. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. And it's time we have some governors that are made of the same stuff as Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. Now, Mary Fallon, the governor of Oklahoma, she issued a nice statement yesterday talking about how disappointed she was in the judge's ruling. Ladies and gentlemen, we are way past the point where we need disappointment from our governors. What we need is outright defiance. And I would suggest that a governor actually has a constitutional obligation to defy an unjust, illegal, unlawful, unconstitutional ruling, because it's blatantly unconstitutional, and a governor has an obligation to reject it and defy it as something that has no legal validity. In fact, I would suggest that submitting to an unjust ruling like that would cause a governor to violate his oath of office. So looking for at least one governor with enough spine to defy King George. Back in 2.